And good morning, everybody. This is Grant with State of the Spark. I've been wearing my sweater. I should actually open up my sweater a little bit so you can see my power, State of the Spark. This is Grant. It's a lovely, lovely Thursday. We are on episode 87. Now, I had a bunch of YouTube episodes, and we got up to episode like crazy, like 200, and then we pulled a bunch down. And then we started the show, and we're on episode, that's right, episode 87. Okay. So this morning, I am excited to talk to you a little bit about Baby Yoda and ZeroG. We're going to cover that. We're going to get wisdom from someone from back in 1927 who knew how to multiply gold. We're going to get into that today. We're also going to be talking a little bit about what we're grateful for, as we should, but I want to tackle hiring. I want to tackle hiring with you because I'm tackling a little additional hiring for me. And as we're adding another customer service person, and as we're adding another production person and going through this process, I'm trying to elevate myself and get better and not do shiny object syndrome and keep cycling about Michael Michalowicz. I was watching one of his videos this morning, and he called me out about that. So we're going to talk about hiring this morning and some 3 concepts on hiring. And I'm thinking not necessarily about our hiring at the moment, because our business and our systems are kind of really very clear. But I know a lot of you who watch are also solopreneurs, or you're just starting out and you've got some interns or some volunteers, and you're not necessarily paying yourself or them market rate. We're going to cover a little bit of how to quickly hire and what you should be hiring in the early days, or in the early days of a project. Like a lot of you watching have run businesses before. You've been managers before. I was managers for years. But when it comes to your own stuff, we're going to touch on that very quickly. But before anything, it's time for a cup of gratitude. We're going to actually share a cup of gratitude this morning. Let me pull my chat up just in case someone hollers at me from one of our many channels. So this morning, what I'm grateful for, man, I got to tell you, we've had 3 gorgeous mornings here in Florida, in Central Florida. It's been perfect weather. You wake up, it's in the mid 50s. The sun comes up and it's like the low 90s, upper 80s. It's just perfect weather right now. And I'm grateful for that we have a crisp morning, because it reminds me of how good everything is and how clean the world is and how quickly and easily we can improve the world around us. You need to look for those things that help remind you that it can get awesome and better. And I'm grateful that we have meaningful work to get to where we're serving others. So what are you grateful for this morning? I want to hear in the comments what you're grateful for and what you're looking forward to most today. So let's get going with other news. In other news, Baby Yoda is the way, and it is the way to what you ask, to ZeroG. So we just saw the Crew Dragon SpaceX craft. I think it's called the Resilience, the Crew Dragon Resilience. It just docked with the space station, as we announced yesterday. And there's a hidden tradition of astronauts that I didn't know about until I saw this. But in short, Baby Yoda is basically the ZeroG indicator. So let's talk about this real quick. Apparently, there is a tradition that goes back to the very first Russian in space. The very first person in space was a Russian. And to indicate when they had actually achieved ZeroG, the Russian Yuri Gagarin, I hope I'm saying his name right. Hopefully he's still around and won't give me crap about it. He basically brought a soft Russian doll next to him. And as they took off and achieved ZeroG, it was the only thing not strapped down, and it would float when it hit ZeroG. And apparently this has been a tradition since the dawn of time. And video footage from inside the spacecraft came through as the 4 astronauts achieved ZeroG. And lo, you can see the Baby Yoda floating surely to indicate that it is the cutely referred to ZeroG indicator on the SpaceX crew craft. I thought that was kind of cute. And it would be kind of awesome. What doll, what soft doll would you bring with you that you had from a kid, I want to hear in the comments, that would be your zero G indicator. How appropriate for it to be Baby Yoda. I remember one of my favorite teddy bears, if you would, was actually Wally the Walrus. It was a big old long-toothed walrus that had a brown body, a white bushy mustache, and white tusks, and we got it at SeaWorld. I loved SeaWorld. It was actually my favorite theme park when I was a kid, and I brought home Wally the Walrus, and I just fell in love with it, and that was my teddy. That was my teddy, not my teddy bear. Confessions of Grant. My teddy bear was Wally the Walrus. In other news, so what does a chromosome look like? I'm sure everyone's wondering. And, after high school or during high school, we were taught that a chromosome kind of looks like a soft, roundy X. And we were always taught that this is what a chromosome looks like. It's tall and narrow, and it kind of looks like the chromatids were kind of parting ways, and it kind of looked like a giant X. And I always remember that because of X-Men, and I was really into X-Men growing up, thanks to my dad's fascination with comic books and got us into comic books. And so I loved it. And I love that X, and I remembered that this is what a chromosome looks like. But apparently not. Apparently, about 90+% of the time, chromosomes are not splitting. What we're used to seeing with a chromosome looking like an X is it's in mid-split, and it's just about to break off and become its own thing. And what does it look like the rest of the time? So this university got together and actually is now using AI and higher powered microscopes to actually see what the real shape of a chromosome actually is most of the time. So here, let me get this for you. Let me drop this in here so you can peruse. Boom. So that's the article to the link right there. And this image that you see in the thumbnail, is what it looks like, or what we were taught chromosomes look like most of the time, but that's just not the case. Apparently, they look more like chemical globules. And the reason for this research is we actually want to know how a chromosome behaves. There's a ton of longevity studies and genetic studies, and they're trying to understand chromosomes in general. So if we can actually get a good high-resolution 3D model of a chromosome, we can see what its chemical composition is for most of its life, and not just the cliche tradition of, oh, I saw a chromosome splitting. So the significance is that this furthers research. So think about the convergence happening here. AI, high-powered electron microscopes, are allowing even the most basic students now to see the chromosome globule as it normally exists 90% of the time. And then they can see how the chemicals begin to organize, and then how it begins to split. And if we can actually see that in higher resolution, a lot of research begins to open up on genetics, DNA, and longevity, ultimately, and disease, and how a lot of this works. So you've got the article there. It's very interesting to actually kind of see, wow, how these convergences are happening on so many different levels. And last but not least, does holding hands hold your marriage together? You bet. Here we go. So when I first saw this article, holding marriages together, holding hands. Whoop. I don't know about that person. Here we go. Boom. In short, when I saw this title, I first thought, what are we talking about? Me and Marissa love walking and holding hands. But there was a piece of research done in psychology. This is from an article in Psychology Today, a small piece of research done that encouraged couples to hold hands during conflict resolution. So when you disagree with your loved one, chances are you're doing this. And chances are you're leaning back. And chances are you're not actually connecting with your partner. So, oh, good morning, Rudd. I just saw your light come through. I hope you're doing great this morning, sir. So chances are when you're in a relationship and you have a loved one or a spouse or a partner, and when you get into a disagreement, body language separates the two of you. In this piece of research, what they encourage is that partners should actually hold hands when dealing with conflict resolution. And some of the benefits are, not the obvious one, but a big one was lowered stress during the conflict. Stress actually gets lower. But some of the things they noted when they noticed that relationship arguments are going off the rails, they noticed several things. Communication behaviors get stunted and shortened. Someone's affect is less caring and more distanced. Reactions are often highly exaggerated. However, when the couple held hands during conflict resolution, communication behaviors expanded and opened up and grew warmer. And the affect of both parties leaned in and grew warmer and more connected. And the reactions to what the other person was saying was often significantly reduced and much less exaggerated, and this led to a much more quickly resolved conflict. So I really encourage you to check out the article on the psychology front that holding hands empirically makes conflict resolution happen more quickly. Now, is it more deep conflict resolution? I don't know. And what if there's other issues at play? Who knows? But from this small piece of research, holding hands can truly hold your marriage together. I hope that's educational to you. Check it out there. I really encourage you. And I'm going to try this, and I know it's going to make Marissa laugh. The next time we have conflict, I'm going to scoot my chair over and take her hands in my hands and look her in the eye. She's going to be like, what is going on? Because often when you're conflicting, you really just want to say it. You want to say what you want to say, and you want to be heard or whatever. But holding hands, I think for many reasons would actually achieve that. And last but not least, as I've said for so long now, here we go. The show is moving here. And even yesterday, the lovely Lisa Welsh was commenting in our chat stream from the actual State of the Spark page. So I would encourage you, actually, I'm not even doing my own due diligence. I need to actually copy and paste these links over here. Oh, where's my show? Over on the State of the Spark page so that the conversation can increase over time there. I'm trying to like the conversation in the comments there. So I'm just going to actually start pasting links, and I'm going to start doing the whole thing over there. So make sure that you're joining us over at State of the Spark, facebook.com/State of the Spark. And then eventually we'll be adding YouTube and all this other stuff, but that's where we're going to be headed right now. So that's the last piece of other news. I hope you learned something intelligent. I hope you learned something smart that's useful in your daily life. Let's talk about what amounts to basically the 3 steps to what you need to hire today. Let's do this. So, if you don't know by now, we're huge fans of Michael Michalowicz, and I'm actually going to try to have him on the show. He's on my list of dream interviews. He's a fantastic guy. In fact, no BS, I've got 2 of his books right here on my desk. Clockwork is fantastic. Fix This Next is kind of the play on words I have in the title for the show today. Michael Michalowicz's mission statement is to simplify entrepreneurship, and their Queen Bee rule, we're going to talk about today, is writing books that matter. And any work that gets in the way of that Queen Bee role of writing books is basically sacrificing the mission or what they promise to deliver on. That is entrepreneurship simplified. So I'm a big fan of Michael Michalowicz. The whole original idea for Spark Bookkeeping was profit first. And that is a Michael Michalowicz book as well. And that has served us profitably. Our company has been profitable since the minute we implemented that. And it's really tightened the belt and caused us to have some real heart-to-hearts. A lot of entrepreneurs, by definition, entrepreneurs are naively optimistic. They ignore the naysayers in order to create a new reality. And that's a good trait. But the negative that does come with that is in the details. And profit often goes out the window. So for today's lesson, I want to talk about hiring. And I think we have to get dead serious. Whether you're a solopreneur, whether you want to build a medium-sized company or a large company, doesn't matter. If you want to stay just a small company with a few employees and be boutique, it doesn't matter. We need to tackle hiring and management. And we're facing this right now. We're trying to get another customer service rep and get another production person and get better in that arena ourselves. We've got to get better. Sometimes we can learn the wrong lesson, as I said in yesterday's show. If you have a separation with employees, or if you have a blow up with a business partner or a spouse, oftentimes we can learn the wrong lesson. And the wrong lesson is often this: never again. I'm never doing this again. You can't trust people. This is the wrong lesson to learn in life. The lesson we need to learn as Spark citizens and as business owners is that we should use every one of these opportunities to get better. So I'm going to take a pause here. First off, if you're watching the show, I see you people watching the show and come in and out of the show. Like the show or share the show or tag somebody who you know in your business circles who's a peer who needs to actually hear a little bit of nudge about hiring. It would mean the world to me. It expands our message and our message of igniting lives of explosive significance. And hiring is critical to you focusing on that mission of igniting lives of explosive significance, or in your case, whether it's in Dan Sampson's case, he makes extraordinary custom executive furniture. Like, he does that. And I'm sure things get in the way of that. And if there is business work that you find yourself doing, Sean, thanks for the like. I really appreciate you, sir. It means a lot to me, man. Thanks for stopping by. So if you have a passion for something within the business, I know Rut's a fantastic guy, and I'm so grateful to have run across him again at our local business co-working space called Catapult. Rut's a doer, and he's a hustler, and he's not full of hot air. A lot of entrepreneurs are full of hot air, and he's out there with the drone, and he has to identify what we're going to talk about today, the QBR, the Queen Bee role, so that you can find out what's getting in the way of the QB role so you can hire immediately. And hear me on this. If you are a solopreneur, I am telling you, you need to hire. Not because you're going to stop being a solopreneur. You might outsource it, but so that you can focus on work that matters. I know that Matthew Wangert is a person I have a huge respect for in his business. You know, when Matthew Wangert started out and said, I'm going to do the luxury market, I balked at him, and I was a hater. I was, and I will confess that. But I have pivoted to being a huge fan of Matthew Wangert. I mean, his business is a fine press, and he does extraordinary high-end luxury print work. And that could be invitations, it could be decorations, but it's like, he calls it holy shit stationery. He wants someone to look at the stationery and go, holy shit. That's a powerful drive, and he's a big follower of Seth Godin. I have a huge respect for Matthew Wangert. Even Matthew Wangert, who is a high art practitioner, even Matthew Wangert needs to hire, and he knows it. So for today's show, we're talking about what you need to hire next. Now, we're going to talk about this in a lot of different ways, but again, tag someone who needs to hear this. If you have already delegated to an office manager, you want that office manager to be better, share this episode with them. I think it's critical because we talk about a lot of feel-good stuff on this show. We talk about inspiration, and we talk about all kinds of samurai and all kinds of fun stuff. But you and I know, if you're watching this show, and if you've been a fan of the show off and on throughout the last few months of the last year and beyond, you know that we've got to land on some real practical things, my friends. And I want to give you practical steps. So let me start with, for just 1.5 minutes, The Richest Man in Babylon. This is by George C. Clason. And people attribute this book to roughly the 60s. But what people don't know is he actually wrote this in 1927 about gold. And I recommend it. You could read it in one sitting. And if you got to think, 1926, and you've got to remember that this was written at a time when there was a lot of farmers losing their work to what was becoming a rapidly accelerating industrialization era. And people still thought in terms of gold. They still thought in terms of money, but money was gold. And the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, is an allegory. It's an allegory of a businessman who came up in the ancient city of Babylon. There was a lot of priests and there was a lot of elders at the gate, but this one businessman came up as a money lender and a money changer, and he shares his rules about gold. And we're talking about hiring today, and I want to share with you this one rule of gold and how it can manifest more. You got to hear this. It's rule number 2. The 5 Laws of Gold. Rule number 2, and I'm only going to read this one, and go out and buy this book. It's a powerful book. You could read it one sitting. It needs to be in your library. It sits right here on this bookshelf that I'm tapping right there because it's so phenomenal, and it's this. Gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field. Now let's translate that to New English. Gold works diligently and happily for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment. And what that simply means is if you have any money and you're a small business owner, chances are you do not want to let that money go. You and I both know that you've been working hard at your job or your business or your solo employment, and you've worked really hard for every dime. So you want to put that money in your bank because chances are you haven't always had money. And now that you have money, yeah, you want the business to grow, but let's be real. You wanted that one outfit you've been looking for, or you need to upgrade your computers. You have, or you know what? You deserve to get that new investment, or maybe you should actually just put that money in the markets for now. You haven't arrived until your passive income can buy those things. Listen to me. I'm saying this with love for the few people watching today. You haven't given yourself permission to get those things until your passive income can buy those things. So when you see an influx of cash, according to George C. Clason and the richest man in Babylon, and according to our lovely, lovely friend, Michael Michalowicz, read this book, Clockwork Next, if you haven't. He covers, and the whole concept is this, the QBR. Here's the lesson for today. The QBR, the Queen Bee Rule. I won't go into where it came from. I'm just going to go into straight principles and what you need to hire next. You need to hire, not your Queen Bee Rule, but you need to follow these quick 3 steps, and me and Marissa are in the middle of this right now because we're actually taking our opportunity right now to redefine our Queen Bee Rule. What is your Queen Bee Role? I think right now of my friend and peer who I have a huge respect for, another gentleman and his wife who are in the luxury markets as well, Shane Mahoney with Lugos Travel. Shane Mahoney has a travel package that's like a $200,000 travel package, and it's the James Bond experience. You've got to see this guy's work. In his business, finding and crafting these extraordinary experiences is the Queen Bee Role. But oftentimes you have a Queen Bee Role. I think of Lisa Welsh, a coaching client and friend. I think content and educating the microgreen market might be her Queen Bee Role. Not necessarily growing her microgreens, not necessarily drying her microgreens, not necessarily going to the farmer's market, though all those things are good. Would your business fall apart if the invoicing didn't get done? Well, I mean, if you really got behind on the invoicing, you could hire that out to an invoicing company, or you could just dump that onto QuickBooks and outsource that. There's a lot of little tasks unless your company sells and has a magic person around the Queen Bee. So I'm talking about the Queen Bee Role because me and Marissa are discussing whether or not we should shift our Queen Bee in our company, but it's top of mind. And I realize a lot of you just assume what's important in my company. And then if you're a solopreneur, you just think, I got to do this all. So I'm going to have 3 quick steps for you. I'm going to give you a few quick things you can do in each of these. But really today is about food for thought about your Queen Bee Role. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Put in the comments what you think your Queen Bee Role is. And if you want to discuss it and actually get advisement, jump over to the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group, and we will actually discuss and try to help you narrow down what your Queen Bee Role is. But step number 1, discover your Queen Bee Role. And I'll break these down for you in a second. Step number 1, discover your Queen Bee Role and declare it. It can change later, but you need a hypothesis you're working with. Number 2, discover what is getting in the way of you executing on the Queen Bee Role. What's blocking it? And step number 3, hire out narrowly right now for what is blocking the Queen Bee Role. That's it. Number 1, discover your Queen Bee Role. Number 2, clearly articulate what is getting in the way and blocking you from purely doing that Queen Bee Role. And number 3, hire out narrowly for each task impeding it. Let's break this down. Number one, discover your queen bee role. For most small business owners, for solopreneurs, your queen bee role is the core thing you do, and it's kind of everything. And I love how people wear solopreneurship on, like as a badge of honor. Ditch that thought, man. Solopreneurship should be a very temporary moment. I don't care if you're a mage at what you do and you getting word of mouth, you're going to need to outsource that marketing, sales, invoicing. If you're staying a solopreneur, it's because you love your craft and you're a craft person, a lot like Matthew Wanger. A lot like Dan Sampson, you're a craft person and you want to create craft and just work in craft, and that's all you want to do. That's great. You're still going to need to hire this out. Solopreneurs right now, you are the queen bee role. Small business owners, it is typically served by the business owner because you typically got into your business because of something you do really well or something that you have a lot of experience in or good clarity in, or you do a unique way. Chances are in small business, it is done by you. That's a clue. In medium-sized businesses or larger, it's often the most skilled people on your staff. I don't mean the highest paid. Sometimes the CEOs are the highest paid. That's not often the queen bee role. You could have an architecture firm with a bunch of high-paid partners, but the highest skilled architect is often that queen bee, and you got to protect that highest skilled architect. Could they be the same people? Yes, but they're not the same role. That leads to my next point about discovering your queen bee role. Just another principle here. Your queen bee role is not a person. Hear me on this. A queen bee role is not a person. I'm going to unpack that just a little bit in a second. It is a role in the company. It's not a machine. If you do, we just, Clay Carson, he was a friend of ours through Catapult who just won the investors grant. And he was looking for a specific machine. And they pushed back and said, we'll just buy the machine, but that's not what's core to your business. This other thing is core to the next level of your business. It's not a machine. In Rut Patel's company, it's not a drone. That's not the queen bee role, right? So it's a role, not a person, not a machine. So an example of different types of queen bee roles. In some companies where craft is king, they gave an example in Clockwork where they talk about breathtaking designs. There's a guy who makes super high-end jeans. Yes, jeans, and they sell for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for these high-end jeans. And they have articulated that their queen bee role is breathtaking designs. So that's their queen bee role. Now they need to discuss, so who does this role really well? And there happens to be a person in that company who comes up with these breathtaking designs. That's the moment where the role also happens to match a person who has a skill and a gift. And that person then needs to be protected. And now they need to start to decide what's in the way. Another example of a queen bee role is communications. They gave another example where there was a strategy company, and that company puts out these well-crafted strategies, and these strategies are what the company is paying for. But what they realized is that even if they met with the client, heard their needs, went away, built a killer strategy and delivered it, the client disregards it, feels that they're getting slighted because they paid tens of thousands of dollars for the strategy, but have no context for it. And there's generally a disappointing experience. Yes, I got what I needed. Yes, I'm reading the details. And yes, blah, blah, blah. What this company discovered is that client communication, aka client education, is the queen bee role in that moment. So in that moment, it's comms or communications, no matter what that price point is. So that's an example where a role is a pure role, and nearly anyone well-trained can execute it. But there was more of a dog and pony show or a smoke and mirror show that when they deliver the strategy, they deliver it with comms. Or as in the process that the strategy is being created, there's a consultant that's educating them about the process. So when a stack of papers comes to them, it has meaning and value, and it matches the price point that they get for that. That's a second example. And then a third example is a log loader. And they cover this in Clockwork. The log loader, they gave an example of a company that was a lumber company. And a train pulls up and a crane grabs these logs, loads these logs, and the train goes on. Apparently, it's a highly competitive market, and there's not a lot of unique service proposition. So this company realized that their only opportunity for true competing with their clients was doing it internally, doing it more profitably. So they found a wizard. They shaped the queen bee rule that said the log loader has to be extraordinarily gifted. They created the role. Then they hired for that role. And this log loader, they've discovered this person, and this log loader came in and they loaded logs where each load has more logs per load. And they loaded it in such a way that offloading it was very efficient, and the person wielded the crane very quickly. In this case, this role then required them to hire this mage. And then what they also discovered is now that this person is doing that, they've got other responsibilities. And then they discovered that in the log loading industry, that other log loaders spend a lot of time doing impeding work. So I just gave you 3 examples of different ways to kind of think about your QBR. Now, that's step 1, discover your QBR. Step 2 is discover what's impeding your QBR. So in terms of impeding, let me give you a few examples. In the breathtaking designs example, where this person has breathtaking designs of their jeans and they get paid thousands of dollars. And what they discovered is they would get a request for a jeans, and it would just be a general request. And then the designer, who's this mega high-end designer, would start designing these jeans. And then they'd get tugged on the sleeve, and they'd say, hey, you've got another request. You did a great jean, great pair of jeans that got sold, and there's a new request in. Well, I'm working on this pair of jeans. Well, the customer's here, and they'd like to talk to you about their next custom thing. So then the designer would then go meet with the customer, and then they'd start to have this backup of requests, but the designs, meanwhile, weren't being done. And when he did sit down to design, he wasn't creative. So even taking custom requests was impeding the queen bee role. So they eventually hired out basically a customer service rep at a low end who was an excitable person, a friendly person, and they would engage all the customer requests, and they'd have a systemized approach of checkboxes, ask a bunch of questions, and then bring that to the designer. In terms of comms, in the comms example of the strategy agency can hire strategists, can hire analysts, can hire researchers. But when they're charging tens of thousands of dollars and they realize that comms, the communication with the client and the education that came with that and the certainty that came across, that's the queen bee role. The owner took that role on and realized, I'm not even going to put the strategies together. I'm going to tell the researcher and the analyst, and I'm going to tell them how to assemble this thing. And then I'm going to turn around and educate the client and spend an extra coffee with the client or get on the phone with them. So they found even assembling the strategy was getting in the way of educating the client. And then they realized, kind of like Leonardo da Vinci, kind of talking to interns and apprentices, this high-end strategist is actually better served educating the client with their strategy and assembling a value-added strategy. Does that mean the strategy is not worth it? No, the company can grow with that. But the placebo in the client's mind was like is much higher when they've been educated in that process. So in terms of discovering what's in the way, they were discovering that, yes, I want to talk to the client and educate them about this, but I've got this researcher asking me questions and I should just do it myself. And I've got this analysis or this analytics person interpreting the data one way, but they're asking me how I would interpret it, and I just need to delegate that. So they systematize how they would actually make these decisions and then delegate it. And hot tip from Michael Michalowicz of Clockwork, you haven't delegated it until you've delegated the decision making. And once these systems were delegated to the strategy support staff, then they could turn around and continue with the client and reinforce the value of the strategy. And in terms of the log loader, last but not least, this is about discovering what's getting in the way of the QBR. In terms of the log loader, what they found is that log loaders would spend a lot of time filling out inventory receipts and getting out of their crane and delivering them to the main office. And they did that because the office staff were the hot shots on the property. But when they found that they could get higher profit margins if they just kept that QBR in the seat of loading logs, they actually hired a little runner, an assistant, to run from the office, run up into the little cockpit of the crane, and then collect all the receipts and write all the receipts down. And that way the crane operator, the log loader, could continue loading logs. And so if you can hire that out and get a higher efficiency out of the QBR at a higher price point, that's how you know you're getting. So step 2 is discovering what's getting in the way of the QBR. So you first have to have a hypothesis. What's the promise we make to clients? And what is the QBR around that? And then my next job as a business owner, this goes to Rut Patel. He wants to build a global organization. He can't manage drones. He's got to make sure someone else is managing that drone, and he's got to be the business developer helping to remove that which is impeding. So that's step 2. Discover what's in the way of your QBR. And then here's what I want to talk about. Hire out narrowly for each task impeding. When you're a small business, as I do, you want them to buy into the vision of the company. I make this mistake all the time. I want them to buy into the vision of the company, so I talk about the vision of the company. I talk about where we're going. And when employees in the past have said, you need to quit talking about that, I've taken that personally. Aren't you bought into the vision? But what I should be thinking is they're probably saying that because it's just too overwhelming to the narrowness of the job from what I expect from them. And so when you hire, the first thing I want you to do is start immediately. If you know your QBR and you know what's impeding your QBR, I want you to start immediately. Carve out time on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning. Yes, if you're trying to hire this out, you're probably still working a little bit into the weekend. That's okay. Sit down and write a job description, 1 page of the things that you just need them done, and keep this narrow. I found that in the past, I've just added too much because I expect these people to mature and grow with me and give them raises. And let's just start small. Give it narrow, give it a reasonable salary, give it a reasonable weekly expectation, and just start. If you're outsourcing on Upwork or FreeUp or 24/7 VA, whatever that is, write down exactly the narrowest you can. The goal is to get as narrow as possible, and then that means your salary can be as narrow as possible. We can add job responsibilities later. You can pay them more if they can perform in this narrow role. Let them know that we'll check in 3 months, but let's just stabilize removing this impediment to the QBR. So start immediately, outline the steps you want for them to take, not just the job, but the steps. You can record a video because we have technology today. Don't write a systems manual. Record exactly what you want them to do. Or just write down bullets. I need you to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I need you to do that a lot. I need you to do that, all day, every day, or I need you to do that 4 days a week. Whatever the demand is, get that thing off your plate. And then decide this. And you'll probably have more than one task impeding your QBR work. You're going to probably have 5 tasks, 6 tasks. Pick the one that's the most impeding that you have the most budget for. You might not have a big budget yet. Well, then you have to back down to the second biggest or the third biggest. Whatever you can afford, pick the nearest one that takes time from your life. Pull that sticky note out, outline that work, and then actually go hire it out. So what can you do? Go to Upwork.com, post that job, be willing to pay immediately. Go to freeup.com, get that account going, do the same thing. We have a local group here called Help Her. They actually do pairing, and we're going to do an interview with a person on Friday with Help Her. So actually get like a placement agency. There's plenty of people willing to work, especially if a decent pay and a narrow enough scope. And with today's connected technology, you could do this. So what do you need to hire next? The thing impeding your QBR. Listen, discover your QBR, take your time, read the Clockwork book, get on the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group, and let's talk about it there. Number 2, discover what is in the way of your QBR. What's impeding you from getting the most important work done? What is it? Define it. And then ask yourself, can I afford that? Or can I afford even 5 hours a week back? Even 4 hours a week back, or 8 hours a week, just even a day a week? Can I get that time back? And what would you do with that time? Would you do more of the QBR? Maybe. Would you add sales to the component? Maybe. We could talk a lot about that in the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group. And last but not least, hire this out immediately. Listen, I hope this has been useful to you today. I hope you're doing fantastic. I hope you're killing it. And remember, as you get out today, to ignite lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. If you need support, join us at the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group. Or if you need good resources, visit us at stateofthespark.com. I believe in you. Kick butt today. Do awesome stuff. And let us know how we can support you.